About what this visit can mean for China and Taiwan relations going forward is Chung Ching Kwong, a political activist from Hong Kong who works as the Hong Kong campaign's coordinator for the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. It's great to have you in the studio today. The big question on everybody's lips, how big of a threat is China in 2020?
I think China in general is a threat to democracy, not only in the region, not only in Hong Kong and Taiwan, but also in general to the entire world because of how it exports surveillance and exports authoritarian tools to tighten control all over the world in African countries and other places in the world. At the same time, it have demonstrated itself as a non-compliant player in the global arena. It doesn't follow any rule. It does not respect the rule-based order. So basically, China is a threat to all of the values that we treasure, and then we feel like we have to defend it against China because it's threatening those values that we hold very dear to.
You, when you were living back in Hong Kong, you were very politically active there, which is the reason why you had to leave the country. And just during the advert break, we were talking there, and you're telling me that you have many friends who are behind bars. I mean, can you explain how oppressive and frightening it was for you and your friends in Hong Kong?
I'd say it's very frightening. A lot of us are definitely still afraid of what is happening in Hong Kong, what has happened in Hong Kong in the past 2 years. And the fear is more like you don't know what you can say or cannot say. Basically, you don't know whether or not something crosses the red line. And you were told the only way to be safe is to not say anything, to be completely compliant. But that's the opposite of what a democratic society should look like. That's why there are people like us and my peers and my other colleagues that are activists or politicians who are willing to fight this kind of this kind of setting that we have to be completely compliant towards the Beijing regime.
Yeah, and what do you, when you see countries like Britain who are now saying, look, we are standing up to countries like China, do you feel that that is true? Because lots of politicians have been accused of cozying up to China, or at least turning a blind eye to some of the things China do, which are, as you mentioned, completely anti-democratic, and in many cases could be said to be genocide.
I think things are slowly changing in Britain in general. Just look at the leadership contest that's happening right now. Last week, China suddenly became the main topic between the two, between Liz and Rishi, about how hawkish they are to China. So we do see that there's a change in the discourse when it comes to China. But it's true that the United Kingdom hasn't done enough to handle the threat that's coming from China. For example, the United Kingdom have an historical and moral obligation towards Hong Kong, but they have merely offered a lifeboat scheme, which is the BNO scheme for Hong Kongers. That is hardly accountability. We have yet to see any kind of sanctions towards Hong Kong officials, and we haven't seen anything that's somehow like accountability when it comes to handling China, and that has to change.
Do you think the problem is here? I mean, the China putting on a display of military might around Taiwan, essentially cutting it off, aren't they, by controlling all of the shipping routes by putting Chinese military vessels there. It's preventing, other boats from going in and out, boats with food, boats with trade. Do you think the problem now is China, over the course of decades, has built up a presence, a military presence, in so many different countries around the world now, with its Belt and Road Initiative, that we've got to a stage where it's extremely hard standing up to Beijing?
Yes, I wouldn't naively say it's the easiest thing to do in the world because that's simply false. But the thing is, we have to decide now whether or not we prioritize human rights and the rule-based world order above economic benefits. It's going to be painful to try to reduce dependency on China, but deepening dependency wouldn't lead us anywhere good. We will only find ourselves in similar situation like the European now when it comes to Russian gas. We will have no point of turning back once we don't change the policies right now and we don't start to reduce dependency.
Do you think we've already reached that point of no return when it comes to how dependent we are on China?
I'd say we are quite dependent on China right now. The world is, it's a fact. But the thing is, there are so many things we can do to not only reduce dependency, but try to change China's behavior. For example, back then, there was the genocide amendment in the parliament going on, which reduced dependency on forced labor goods. I'm not saying we should completely ban trade with China, but we definitely should not trade with China when it comes to goods that violates human rights or involve, as you said, genocide. This should not happen. And there are ways that we can do it by working on procurement bills saying that we shouldn't procure from areas with serious risk of genocide or human rights violations. These things can slowly change how we talk about China and how we deal with trade when it comes to China.
Which British politician, in your view, has been firmest with China? Who would you have most confidence with to become when they become prime minister, to take that approach that you would be really looking to see when it comes to taking action against China?
I think a lot of the politicians from where I work, the Interparliamentary Interparliamentary Alliance on China, all of our politicians stand very firm against China. And I'd say when it comes to the two candidates for the leadership contest, I would just look at their track record. When do they start to talk about China? Are they just making a U-turn at the very last few weeks when it comes to a contest? Or if they have been developing a stronger and stronger stance when it comes to China, and which are more convincing? I am not a British citizen, so it's not up to me to say who should be your leader in general. But I do say, please take into consideration of who is taking a stronger stance on China, because that is very important when it comes to foreign policy in the UK.